Hello, everyone. It's Miss Cole, and once again, I'm going to be talking about Pride and Prejudice, which I'm reading for the very, very first time, kind of slowly. And I have not watched any of the movies, but I'm familiar with the characters because they're everywhere. And I pretty much know the plot because it's Pride and Prejudice, and I'm an English teacher, and of course, everybody knows Pride and Prejudice, especially if you're an English teacher. So I am trying to get past the stigma of being the whole you haven't read that. And also, this is my secret shame. So I'm moving past that. So this will cover chapters 6 through 10 of book 2. So to sum up, the main character is Elizabeth Bennet, and her sister has gone to London to stay with relatives. Sort of, but not exactly, in the hope that the guy that she likes, Mr. Bingley, who has gone to London, will possibly come by and pay her a visit. But that hasn't worked out so well. Elizabeth has gone to another home in the country to visit her friend Charlotte, formerly Lucas, who is now married to Mr. Collins. And Mr. Collins is the man who is going to inherit the house that Elizabeth Bennet and her family live in when her father dies, because the estate is entailed, which means a woman cannot inherit it. It's been really interesting so far, and I feel like I'm liking the wrong characters. So we'll see if that continues throughout the rest of the book. At the end of chapter 5, they had just been invited to Lady Catherine de Bourgh's estate for dinner, I believe, the next evening. And Mr. Collins is just like over the moon because he's going to get to show off his patron, which is kind of weird, but whatever. The way that this is introduced is just fun. He is just delighted to be able to introduce his guests to someone who is like super duper important. And the author writes that an opportunity of doing this should be given so soon was such an instance of Lady Catherine's condescension as he knew not how to admire enough. And so that's something that's interesting, because I think that condescension now has a meaning that is different from what it used to mean. Like, now being condescending is like, oh gosh, they're so condescending, but essentially it means coming down from someplace on high, you condescend to, but I mean, I feel like Austen doesn't mean it quite so negatively. Like, there's nothing positive about it in modern conversation. But here he's saying it is so good of her in her grandeur to spend her time with the little people. And he really believes this. Elizabeth, not so much. So, I remember liking the visit with Lady Catherine. Poor Maria Lucas, who is Charlotte's younger sister and has come along for the visit, along with their father, gets a little bit nervous. Such formidable accounts of her ladyship and her manner of living quite frightened Maria Lucas, who had been little used to company. Of course, no mention is made of Elizabeth Bennet, who doesn't seem to be at all put out by this. She's like, okay, so we're going to meet somebody who's rich. Cool. And we get a description of Lady Catherine. Lady Catherine was a tall, large woman with strongly marked features, which might once have been handsome. Her air was not conciliating, nor was her manner of receiving them such as to make her visitors forget their inferior rank. She was not rendered formidable by silence, but whatever she said was spoken in so authoritative a tone as marked her self-importance. My margin note says, she's a battle axe. I like her already. I think we're not supposed to because she's so full of herself, but especially in that day and age, a woman who can command that sort of attention and not just demand, but command it. She demands it and she gets it. And she gets treated as though she is it. And I like that, okay? So deal with it. I like it. I like her. And of course, Mr. Collins is, overly attentive and just, admires everything, and he's so grateful. And Elizabeth is like, dude, you're overdoing it. But Lady Catherine seemed gratified by their excessive admiration and gave most gracious smiles. There's a sense there of noblesse oblige, like, it is just my due, of course. And I'm just, again, I like her. She's so awesome. I just love it to bits. When the ladies returned to the drawing room, there was little to be done but to hear Lady Catherine talk. And, once again, I'm all for that, because let me tell you, I can run my mouth too. And so to have a character in here who's just like, I'm going to say things and y'all are going to listen, and they do. It's just, I'm like, a woman after my own heart. Which she did without any intermission until coffee came in, delivering her opinion on every subject in so decisive a manner as proved that she was not used to having her judgment controverted. And she interrogates Elizabeth. Do you play and sing, Miss Bennet? A little. Oh, sometime or other we shall be happy to hear you. You're gonna, yeah, this is how it's gonna be. Our instrument is a capital one, probably superior to, you shall try it someday. Do your sisters play and sing? One of them does. Why did you not all learn? You ought all to have learned. The Miss Webbs all play, and their father has not so good an income as yours. Do you draw? No, not at all. What, none of you? Not one. That is very strange. But I suppose you've had no opportunity. Your mother should have taken you to town every spring for the benefit of tutors. And just, this is how you should have done it. And just, Elizabeth, she keeps her poise, and I do admire that. She is not cowed by Lady Catherine's force of personality. And there is something to be said that she railroads everybody. But you also get the sense that she is not offended by Elizabeth, who doesn't, Elizabeth is not disrespectful, but she doesn't, grovel. And you get the sense that Lady Catherine is like, okay, all right then. She finds out that they haven't had a governess, and she is just like, what? How? Then you are all ignorant? What? And she says, you must have been neglected. And she says, such of us as which, Elizabeth says, such of us as wished to learn never wanted the means. Those who chose to be idle certainly might. Now, I'm a teacher, so I'm with Lady Catherine on this. Sometimes things are hard, and children need encouragement, and sometimes, a little bit of an extra push. And that's, they need support, not just, oh, are you're tired of practicing? Okay. And just, just let to do whatever they want. So, And Lady Catherine says, yes, that is what a governess will prevent. So I'm just, it's nothing, yeah, I'm with Lady Catherine there. She asks Elizabeth how old she is, and Elizabeth sort of demurs, and it says Lady Catherine seems quite astonished at not receiving a direct answer. But I did notice that she doesn't chastise Elizabeth. She doesn't call her out for, for not following her guidance, her directions. On the other hand, Elizabeth doesn't, butt up against her directly. So just their interaction the whole way through is just absolutely intriguing. And it's fun to watch them because Lady Catherine is really pushy and Elizabeth just sort of won't be pushed. There's no fireworks, but it's a really interesting interaction. Mr. Collins asks Elizabeth to, what did you think of it? And she knows that he expects her to gush. And she kind of goes in between because it says, for Charlotte's sake, her friend who is married to her cousin, for her friend's sake, she makes her description more favorable than it really was. So she's, sort of putting a good, an extra gloss on things, but at the same time, still not enough for her cousin, Mr. Collins, who's like, but didn't you think it was absolutely divine? And, but she's just like, it was really nice. That's not enough. No, you must gush. And she doesn't actually gush. She gushes for her, but it's not the same as him. But I like Mr. Collins. He's adorable and so eager. Bless his heart. Bless his heart. Bless his heart. Chapter 7, Sir William stayed only a week at Hunsford. So that is Charlotte and Maria's dad. And then he leaves. But he's come to kind of check on her. And he decides, she's doing pretty well. So he leaves. And that got me thinking, how the heck long is Elizabeth, visiting? Only a week? Oh, how long do people, like, if you go and you, like, you know, go to visit your friend, how long do you typically stay? Like, obviously a week isn't a lot, but it seems like a lot to me. But apparently they stay for like months at a time. I don't know. I guess that's rich people in England. Anyway, there was a part that confused me in chapter 7 early on. Very few days passed in which Mr. Collins did not walk to Rosings, which is Lady Catherine's estate, and not many in which his wife did not think it necessary to go likewise, until Elizabeth recollected that there might be other family livings to be disposed of. She could not understand the sacrifice of so many hours. I didn't know what... Is she talking about how maybe Lady Catherine will find a match for Maria? Not really sure there what she's talking about. That was a little bit confusing. And I'm an English teacher, so there are probably parts of this book, if you're not an English teacher, that are also confusing for you. So it's okay. Sometimes things are confusing. So in this quiet way, the first fortnight, and I have an exclamation point in the morning, a fortnight's 2 weeks. So this is the first set of 2 weeks, and apparently there's going to be more. I don't know. I mean, like, I love my parents, but like when we go to visit my parents, it's for like an afternoon. So the idea that like you would go to visit your cousin and a friend of yours who's, you know, they're married, and you're just staying for just a month or more just for a visit, is like completely foreign to me. This is something I did not see this coming at all. And so then Elizabeth had heard soon after her arrival that Mr. Darcy was expected there in the course of a few weeks. That makes me want, we haven't heard anything about Jane. Presumably Jane knows that she is there because it's been like weeks. And I haven't heard anything about the post or, you know, reading letters or anything. So Charlotte has found out that Mr. Darcy and Lord Fitzwilliam are going to be arriving. And so she goes to tell the girls, which means Maria is still there, because not just Elizabeth. She goes to tell the girls that this is some great honor. And Charlotte says, "I may thank you, Eliza, for this piece of civility. Mr. Darcy would never have come so soon to wait upon me." She is a smart lady. I like Charlotte a lot. She is just savvy, and she's quiet, and she's practical, and she thinks about about her goals, and she goes for it. Good girl. Mr. Darcy shows up, and then she says, "My eldest sister has been in town these 3 months. Have you never happened to see her there?" And of course she means, why the heck has Mr. Bingley not been over to visit Jane? Because like they were super close over the summer. What is wrong with him? And she knows that they haven't gone to visit. So she's kind of being a little, you know, manipulative there, but it says she thought he looked a little confused. So she lets it drop. Chapter 8. So she's been there for several weeks at this point. It turns out that Lady Catherine, they're staying with Lady Catherine. And while Lady Catherine has more important visitors, she doesn't invite them. So it's not until Easter, almost a week after Lord Fitzwilliam and Mr. Darcy have shown up, that they get another invite from Lady Catherine. So, God, I don't know how long she's going to stay there. Gracious. Lady Catherine received them civilly, but it was plain that their company was by no means so acceptable as when she could get nobody else. So they're sort of the leavings, unfortunately. Or perhaps fortunately in Elizabeth's case, because I don't know that she enjoys it quite as much as everybody else does. And I'm curious, we're talking about Lady Catherine, Mr. Darcy, and Elizabeth, and Mrs. Collins, and I'm like, where is Mr. Collins? And where's Maria? Maybe they're just not saying anything. But Mr. Collins runs his mouth. I mean, he's like, "Oh, this china is beautiful. Oh, this silver is beautiful. Oh, this this stemware is beautiful." You know, but I guess we're just not paying attention to him. Lord Fitzwilliam and Elizabeth are like chit-chatting. And then Lady Catherine's like, they're saying something. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And it says, he finally says, "We are speaking of music, madam," said he, when no longer able to avoid a reply. So, like, she is butting in on their conversation. He's trying to, like, have a private conversation, and he can't. Look, it's not going to happen, dude. Mr. Darcy looked a little ashamed of his aunt's ill breeding and made no answer. So a woman who speaks her mind forthrightly is ill-bred. Not keen on that. So they finally get Elizabeth to play the piano. And she's like, okay. Mr. Darcy is talking with Lady Catherine. Theoretically. Except that he gets up, walks away from Lady Catherine, and goes over to the piano. And it says, he stationed himself so as to command a full view of the fair performer's countenance. I'm just saying. I don't know. He just doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, I want to go look at her. She's pretty. I like her. Blah. Fine. She doesn't like you. Get over it. Except she doesn't really get it. She says, you mean to frighten me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in all this state to hear me? No. He could hear you across the room. He came over to look at you. Obviously. I don't know. Maybe it's obvious to us because the narrator just flat out tells us. And if we were actually trying to concentrate on playing the piano, it would be less obvious. Mr. Darcy speaks up on his own behalf and says, you couldn't really believe that I meant to upset you. I'm like, yeah, that's my note. Tell her what she thinks, Darcy. That'll go over really well with Elizabeth. Just like, no, you actually, you wouldn't really think that of me. Just let it do. Just walk away, dude. Just walk away. Ay. And then, with Darcy right there, Elizabeth starts talking to Colonel Fitzwilliam about Mr. Darcy. And he's like, what, you don't think he's awesome? I think he's awesome. And she's like, no, he wouldn't, there was a ball and he wouldn't dance even though we had a whole bunch more girls than guys. And there were a whole bunch of girls just kind of standing around wanting to dance, but without a partner, and he wouldn't help out. And he's like, well, but I didn't know anybody. She's like, yeah, because like a dance is a terrible place to meet people and get introduced. He's like, well, but it's hard, okay? Suck it up, dude. This is part of being in society. This is what business is. Like, it's talking to people and like, oh, how can he be successful in business if he's this, like the whole thing? I remember this from just like memes and stuff, that he's socially awkward. But like, doesn't he have to talk to people to arrange his business? Isn't that how it works? I'm so confused. Yeah, that's what my note says. Suck it up, dude. This is what business requires. He says, I don't have the talent of conversing easily with those I have never seen before. Like, when you're going to enter into a new business venture, you haven't met those people before. Like, I don't get it. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's so rich, I guess. Maybe that's it. He's so rich that he doesn't have to talk to anybody. He has people to do that for him. I don't like him. Sorry, there's poor people around, and he's like just so rich that he doesn't have to, like, he has people to do everything for him. He's Prince Naveen. He can't chop a mushroom. And Elizabeth won't take it. She doesn't actually call him out on it, but she just starts talking about her own piano playing. And she says, I'm really not as good as other people, but I never supposed it to be my fingers' fault. I just assumed it was because I don't practice as much as other people do. And of course, it's just sort of a segue. She's not necessarily exactly talking about him, but she's totally talking about him. Maybe if you made an effort and you practiced talking to people, you would get better at it. Just maybe. Maybe it would still be challenging, but it wouldn't be as challenging if you practiced it and developed skill. So Lady Catherine comes over and says, hey, what's going on? So Elizabeth starts playing again. It's like, do. I'm just playing the piano. Nothing going on here. I'm not getting singers in at your nephew. Totally, I'm getting singers in at your nephew. Lady Catherine starts talking about Elizabeth playing. Elizabeth received her remarks with all the forbearance of civility. So she is quite clearly putting up with Lady Catherine. And that's it. And so finally, in the next chapter, chapter 9, we hear that Elizabeth is writing to Jane. So apparently there's been correspondence going on, but the narrator hasn't told us about it because I guess nothing important has happened. That's my guess. So she's writing to Jane, and guess who shows up? It's Mr. Darcy, who seems, it says he seemed astonished on finding her alone. And they just sit there. And it says it was absolutely necessary, therefore, to think of something. And she's trying to think of something to say. And that, of course, made me think of Clue at the dinner table when Professor Plum says, are you concerned? You seem to suffer from what we call pressure of speech. And so Elizabeth seems to suffer from pressure of speech, which, is probably socialized in her. Like, she's the lady. She's supposed to make idle chit-chat. That's her job. To look pretty, play the piano, and chit-chat. Ha 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 ha. Whatever. So then they have some repartee, which is all right. And we get to see the difference in their economic standings because they talk about travel. And for her, coming to visit Charlotte, her friend, is a big deal because it's like really far for her. And he's like, Mr. Darcy's just like, what? It's like, she says it's an easy distance for her. 'Cause she's talking about her friend being far from her family. And he says it's like 50 miles of good road. And she's like, that's not an easy distance. And he says, yeah, the road's fine. I call it a very easy distance. She's like, no. They can't, they have different perspectives, as far as, how many carriages do you have? How acceptable is it for you to just get on a horse and go ride somewhere? You're a dude, you're rich. She doesn't have, and especially she's talking not just about her friend Charlotte, but also herself. And so, she's thinking about herself and her sisters, that if they marry someone who lives further away, it will cut them off from their family. And their family, for all its faults, is very close. And so they're at loggerheads about this. Mr. Darcy says, why are you so attached to the town? You can't always have been at Longbourn. And it says, Elizabeth looks surprised. I'm totally confused. Didn't she grow up in this house? Isn't this where she has always lived? I missed something somewhere. I thought she always had been at Longbourn. And I don't know why she's surprised. No clue. So eventually, Mr. Darcy just, leaves. And Charlotte Lucas gets back, Charlotte Collins now, I keep forgetting that. She's married. She comes back, and Elizabeth says, that was, so weird. Mr. Darcy came by, and I have no idea why he came to visit. And Charlotte's like, well, maybe he just didn't have anything better to do. And I'm thinking, why is he visiting Lady Catherine? Doesn't he have business? Is he there on business? I don't know. Why are he and Lord, what's his name? Why are they there? IDK. I assume that they came to visit family, which would mean that they do have things to do, as in spend time with their family, right? I guess not. I don't know. The narrator goes on to tell us, through Elizabeth's perspective, why Mr. Darcy came so often to the parsonage. It was more difficult to understand. It could not be for society, as he frequently sat there 10 minutes together without opening his mouth. And it's just, she really is that blind. I mean, it's clearly just the pleasure of quiet company. And also, she doesn't, she'll let him say nothing. And I would guess he just likes that. And also, this is just now occurring to me. I don't have a note on it. But after being around Lady Catherine, maybe being around somebody who doesn't say anything is a really nice change of pace. Charlotte has nudged Elizabeth that maybe there's more going on. But Elizabeth is like, no, not possible. But Charlotte kind of keeps that just sort of off to the side. It says, for in her opinion, it admitted not of a doubt that all her friend's dislike would vanish if she could suppose him to be in her power. I'm not entirely sure Charlotte's right on that account. First of all, Elizabeth is really stubborn. And second, she's not the sort to bag a bird, as they would say. Just the sense of having, oh, I've got him. Ha ha ha, I've got him on a string. She's not that sort of person. But it makes Charlotte seem kind of schemy. That she's like, let's see how this goes. And she's sort of watching how things play out. Chapter 10. So, Elizabeth likes to go on walks through the parks. She starts coincidentally running into Mr. Darcy there. And it's ticking her off because she's told him that she really likes going for a walk in the park. And she doesn't understand why she keeps meeting him there when she's like, look, this is my space. I like it here. And so I underlined this, how she took care to inform him the first time that it was a favorite haunt of hers. How it could occur a second time, therefore, was very odd. Yet it did. And even a third. So I underlined that and wrote, how dumb was she? Like, this is beyond like, I'm Superman. No, I'm Clark Kent. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Just a mild-mannered, humble, ordinary reporter just taking down notes and stuff. I have the power to leap tall buildings. Lois will never recognize me now. Heh heh heh. So you tell him that you like hanging out here, and all of a sudden, he starts showing up here more. I mean, like, how can you miss that? Like, this, I just don't get it. We're supposed to think she's smart, and it's not working. You're like, you're saying that she's smart and, intelligent and perceptive, and then you do this. Like, this is like not breathing. It's okay. I'm just having to accept things. I'm like, okay. I suppose it's possible that she, it's gotten stuck in her head that he doesn't like her. And she's fixated on that idea so much that she isn't able to process contrasting information. It's a bias. So that is so strong that it influences her reception and processing of new information. So she's walking along, and she has Jane's letter with her, and she's, rereading some of it, and she looks up and notices, oh, it's Colonel Fitzwilliam. And it says, putting the letter away and forcing a smile. My margin note says, ooh. So, it's not Mr. Darcy. So why is the smile forced? Gee, I wonder. And so she asks them, she's like, you guys are leaving on Saturday, right? And Colonel Fitzwilliam says, yeah, if Darcy doesn't put it off again. So apparently they were supposed to leave earlier, but Darcy's like, I have more business that I have to conduct, but not by talking to people, just like hanging out and occasionally going over to the parsonage because, like, the church guy, he's really cool. Yeah, they're all oblivious. Everybody except Charlotte. Charlotte knows what's going on. So then it turns out that they start talking about things sort of not inadvertently. What's the word? Sort. Colonel Fitzwilliam admits. So he is apparently a younger son, and he says a younger son has to get used to self-denial and dependence. And speaking of his own, and Elizabeth's like, yeah, you're the younger son of an earl, dude. Calm yourself. But at the same time, he's not going to inherit like the estate. So he does have to he has to make his own way. And, but it's interesting because he says, I can have horses, I can have, stuff, but I have to plan for the future. He says, younger sons cannot marry where they like. And I'm just like, but isn't that true of older sons too? Like, older sons have to establish the family line and carry things on and make sure that the estate is well tended to and, provided for. At least as much as the younger son, they have a responsibility to marry for money so that there's more money coming in to attend to the estate, I would think. I would think that a younger son would actually have more flexibility in being able to marry freely. So Elizabeth's like, is he talking about me? Is he like essentially saying, yeah, I like you, but it's not going to work out because you're broke? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what, and we're in Elizabeth's perspective, so I guess it makes sense that I can't follow that along. So they start talking about Georgiana Darcy, and it's interesting because I know what they're talking about, because I know what happened with spoilery stuff, that Colonel Fitzwilliam says that he and Mr. Darcy are co-guardians of Mr. Darcy's younger sister, Georgiana. She is not real happy with, Elizabeth is not real happy with Georgiana Darcy, because Georgiana Darcy is the one that she thinks Mr. Bingley's sisters are trying to set up with Mr. Bingley. And her sister, Elizabeth's sister, is the one who likes Mr. Bingley. So it's, I have no idea if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, unlike some of the other stuff in here. And she says, so does Georgiana, you have to look after her. Does she give you much trouble? And as she spoke, she observed him looking at her earnestly. Because I think I can say, this is not a big spoiler, but it's leading into, he's thinking that she means something, that she knows something that she doesn't know, that I know, because I know spoilery stuff. There's something going on, something that has happened that, Georgiana needs a little bit of extra looking out for. She has caused, there have been problems. And he thinks she knows about this, or that she has some information about it. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? But Elizabeth thinks that maybe Miss Darcy is just not going along with the match between her and Mr. Bingley. And so, each of them thinks that they know what the other is thinking, but they don't. And so there are all kinds of layers of assumptions going on that are interesting to look past and look through if you can figure it. Colonel Fitzwilliam says that Mr. Darcy, takes care of the people he cares about. He looks out for them. And, he takes care of and looks out for Mr. Bingley. And she's like, yeah, I bet he does. She's not happy about this. And, Colonel Fitzwilliam, who knows very little, who knows none of the connection to Elizabeth, says, well, he did save his friend from a really terrible, potential situation. Elizabeth's like, oh, did he now? Tell me about this. And, he's like, well, I shouldn't, it was all conjecture. And I underlined that and wrote, oops. And then down in the margin I wrote, I should not have said that. Because there's definitely a Hagrid moment. He's like, I don't really know what I'm talking about. And now you're asking about it. And I don't 100% know. And he's like, well, he doesn't really want it to be known. And if it was going to get around to this lady's family, it would be really unpleasant. And I'm just like, first of all, too late. And second of all, yes, you're really right. It's going to be unpleasant. Which, because I'm not involved in this, I think it's hilarious. Ha ha ha. So, what Mr. Darcy, so many characters, told Colonel Fitzwilliam was that he congratulated himself on having lately saved a friend from the inconveniences of a most imprudent marriage, but without mentioning names or any other particulars, and I only suspected it to be Bingley from believing him to be the kind of young man to get into a scrape of that sort. Elizabeth. I mean, it doesn't tell us that she is silently enraged, but let me tell you. Fury. Flames on the side of my face level of fury. I don't know. There would be no going back from that. I don't know. I don't know that I'm going to be interested to see whether Austen is able to convince me that Elizabeth gets past her, family. She cared. Jane is the person she loves best in the world. And this guy, Jane really cared for Charles Bingley. And this guy got in the way and put a bug in his ear's friend and said, don't marry her. And I don't see that that's forgivable. Mm-mm. I know, and I know that things, I know what happens later. And, how, heroic things that Mr. Darcy does. No. He darn well better say, it was wrong of me to do that. I'm sorry, and I was wrong. If he doesn't say that he was wrong, I don't know. I may end up being like, yeah, nope, sorry, Austen, you're just, no. And again, some of that 21st century reader, and also way older than like the kids in this book. They're so young. Oh my God, they're so young. So Elizabeth asks, did he say why he did this? And Colonel Fitzwilliam says, I understand that there were some very strong objections against the lady. The lady being Jane. Like, Jane the angel. Like, backlit and, singing in the background. Ah, it's Jane! No! How could they... No. Okay, again, this is like third hand. He's, just sort of getting it, but whatever. And Elizabeth is not happy about this. And Colonel Fitzwilliam's like, doesn't he have the right to offer his opinion? He's like, I don't see what right he has to meddle in his adult friend's, business. And so, it's just a matter of exactly how much, because she's getting this through Colonel Fitzwilliam. So he's, and it's only been sort of alluded to for him. So how much, she doesn't actually know how much influence it was. Did he tell him? Did he push him? Did he just say, maybe that's not such a good idea? But at the same time, Elizabeth is like, how can anybody not love Jane? And the narrative essentially frames Jane as pretty much the perfect woman. So she's not wrong in that because everybody loves Jane. Everybody loves Jane. Like, nobody doesn't like Jane. And I'm kind of two minds because why shouldn't, why shouldn't Mr. Darcy speak his mind and just let Mr. Bingley decide? But Elizabeth seems to think that it's more than that he's, being kind of pushy. She keeps on thinking about this while they're, heading back to the house. And she remembers him saying there were some very strong objections against the lady. And so Elizabeth is thinking that these strong objections probably were her having one uncle who was a country attorney and another who was in business in London. And I'm like, you can't think of any other possible reasons that somebody might object. And she says to Jane herself, there could be no possibility of objection because, yes, again, Jane, angel, faultless, like, gonna be dead because she's so good. Neither could anything be urged against my father, who, though with some peculiarities, has abilities with which Mr. Darcy himself need not to say. So she can't find any fault with her father. So she obviously has some blinders on there. When she thought of her mother, her confidence gave way a little. She's like, well, my mom, some issues there, but surely that's not enough. So she decides that the next time they get invited to Lady Catherine's, she just can't go because she just does not want to see Mr. Darcy. I think she would have stabbed him with a fork. And she gets herself she's so upset that Charlotte doesn't press it, even though her husband, Mr. Collins, was like, well, but it's Lady Catherine. We have to go. Mr. Collins could not conceal his apprehension of Lady Catherine's being rather displeased. He's like, she won't approve. And that's where the chapter ends. So I am intrigued to see if Jane Austen can turn this around for me. Because right now, no. Unless Mr. Darcy admits he was wrong, I ain't gonna forgive him. He has to say he doesn't just have to do good things that help the family, which I know he does later on. Sorry, spoilers, I'm being deliberately vague. That's not enough. He has to admit that he was wrong. Or I don't think I'm going to be able to forgive him. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for sticking around. I kind of rambled this time. I was a little bit more freeform. So I'm curious if that helped or if it sucked. Let me know. I'm always delighted to get comments. Check me out on Goodreads down in the description. And if you are watching this on the day that it comes out, remember that tomorrow on Friday at 6 o'clock, I will be talking about this book in a live stream with Steve Shives, The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. And hopefully I will see you there. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.